All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Good in the Head podcast. My name is Pete Jones, and I am good in the head. Today on the show, we have a good friend of mine on. His name is Phil, and I know him from work. We both work at Boeing, and he's got an interesting story that I'm really excited for him to share with everyone, and something that he created because of what he's experienced. He's created this movement called Hope for Stroke Survivors. It's on Instagram and TikTok, and it's just hope, the number four, stroke survivors, and people who have any brain anomaly, disease, any kind of a disability or illness. The content that he puts out is just a phenomenal, inspiring, useful channel to follow for everyone because sooner or later we're all going to experience health issues, right? So anyway, welcome to the Good and Head podcast, Phil. Thanks for being on.
Hey, thanks, Pete. No, I really appreciate the time and you setting this up. Kind of
Yeah,
works out that it's March 1st too, so that's pretty cool.
yeah, March 1st, 2025. I know that we've both seen some things and come a long way in our lives, and I'm excited to dive deep into your story. Before we get into it, I'm a big follower of Ram Dass, and he once said after he had a stroke, he said that he was stroked by God, right? He said this helped him to reframe his own beliefs surrounding his post stroke experiences as a loving gesture by a loving God that wanted him to expand in different ways than he was expanding pre stroke. And I knew you before your stroke, and I've watched as you've battled along and recovered. And literally, you're a walking miracle. Every time I see you, I'm blown away by the resilience of humans and the miraculous recovery that's possible for everyone, man. It's just good to still have you with us. I'm really grateful that you are because of the movement that you started.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Pete. It's been awesome just to know you prior to the stroke, and then our friendship has evolved and we've both helped each other out, I feel like, mentally and spiritually.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
Yeah, I think related to that quote, I remember you sharing that with me, and I saw Ram Dass's, I guess it was like a Netflix special. And I think having a stroke or some kind of medical health issue, it has a lot of, different judgments on it, and a lot of it is negative. And I really like how Ram Dass shifted his perspective because I think that is really important in my recovery journey. Is just how I viewed it because a lot of people around me, looked at it a certain way, told me this and that, it wasn't possible. But I think I really had to shift my perspective because I think that is what helped to get me to where I'm at now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to start out at the beginning, Let's get to know Phil from childhood on up. What was your life like? What are the main lessons you got from your life and some of your favorite stories and experiences?
Sure, I'll tell you. As far as my family, I have two older sisters. I'm the youngest boy and the only boy in the family. My family is from Vietnam, and everyone in my family was born in Vietnam except for me. Actually, they escaped Vietnam to go to the Philippines at a refugee camp, and that's where I was born. And so that's how I got the name Phil. Actually, my real name is Fat, but then my family called me Phil or Philip because I was the only one born in the Philippines. But as far as with my childhood, I feel like, we did start here in Arizona, and we lived with two other families in like a trailer home, so we started with nothing. I feel like when I look back at my childhood, I as I get older, right, I realize things, and the thing that I'm very grateful for is my parents. They never showed that, the hardships they were going through, they were able to provide for us, and so I really appreciate that. But I think growing up, I mean, as you know, things have changed, right, compared to when we were younger. And I think when I was younger, things were a lot different. I felt like I was like the only Asian like around, and I was trying to figure out things and trying to see where I fit in. And so I think I experimented a lot, just tried different groups, hanging out with different groups and different things. But yeah, I think everything kind of led up into the point where I am at now. And it's taught me a lot, but I feel like my childhood, kind of started with nothing. But the thing about it is I think family is a big one for us. And my dad, he has 8 siblings total, and then my mom has 6. And so, I
Nice,
mean,
big
uh,
family.
yeah, you can imagine all the cousins and stuff. I mean, they're all kind of split up. A lot of my mom's is here in Arizona,
Nice.
but yeah, they're kind of split out. But yeah, I think family was the big one for me, just to have them around. And yeah, my childhood was, I appreciate that a lot. We didn't have a lot, but we had each other.
That's true for so many of us growing up. That things really have changed, like you said. So going back to the Philippines, how old were you when you came to Arizona?
I came here when I was
Okay.
1 years old.
Wow.
So
And so
yeah,
you've been here pretty much your whole life then, huh?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is pretty much all I know. I think when we just got here, I think we had experimented real quick like in California and I think Texas as well. But
Nice.
then we decided to come here with my uncle.
Cool. Wow. What a journey they have made. And that takes a lot of courage and resilience and commitment to do something like that. And I know that, I mean, we're also from a big family, so is my wife, and it's just really a phenomenal opportunity to have so many supporters and so many people backing you, especially when things kind of go awry or how you're not planning for them to. But having that support is everything.
Yeah, that's true. I do think a lot of times I don't even think about it and it does, help fuel me, I think.
Hmm. Now I'm the only boy, and I'm the oldest though, so I had a lot of
Oh,
sisters growing up, and I think that we're kind of gifted in a way to have such great females in our life, as examples, and to have a couple of older sisters. I would guess that that's a blessing because as a man, you want to know how to treat women right, and I'm sure that they showed
oh,
you what was up, and how to do that. And
that's a good one. Yeah.
I know I worked with your Aunt Trang for a while. She actually trained me when I first started working over there at
That's good
Boeing.
stuff about you. Yeah.
Uh, She used to get so frustrated with me, and she'd go tell my wife, "Oh, I love your husband. He's such a nice man, but he's so frustrating. He doesn't listen." And Carla's like, "I know, right?" I'm like, "I'm trying, I promise."
Yeah, I
But
remember this when I first met you, she introduced me to you and she's like, yeah, this is Pete over here. And it's just funny how, things have been and how
yeah,
our relationship has gone. She
yeah.
tell you still.
So, be at Boeing, before your stroke, what were you doing, and what was that like for you? How long had you been there?
You know what? Before the stroke, people ask me, okay, was I stressed out? And I think, I was involved with a lot of things. I think different organizations. I think work was busy. I think yeah, I was teaching a class. I think I was doing a lot of things. But the thing about that is, I do feel like it was a good balance of things, between work and personal. So, I felt like, yeah, I was busy, but it was a good balance of things that fulfilled me, right? It's nice to have a little bit of both ends. So, that was my life prior. And I was doing stuff like within the community and I enjoyed that kind of stuff. I had, yeah, different things that I was doing. But yeah, it was a good balance, I feel like.
Very, very busy. I know that at the point of your stroke was right when we were all going through the COVID crisis and all this bull crap, and
Yeah.
our workplaces, all of them were saying, "Hey, look, unless you get this vaccination, you're going to lose your job." And it was really stressful for so many of us. We're like, "What should we do? We don't want to do this because we don't trust it, but yet, the comforts and lifestyle are going to disappear overnight unless we do this. It was a big decision for a lot of people. And a lot of our coworkers were like, absolutely not, and I really hats off to them. I respect that.
Yeah, me too. I think during that time we were all feeling it, and it's like, okay, what to do, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know we ended up getting it, and we had some pretty severe inflammation issues afterwards. I know there's been a lot of research and study since. A lot of people were, what do they call it, like vaccine injured,
Mhm.
Um, and I'd like to go into your story, the day that your stroke happened, what you were doing, how you were feeling, everything surrounding that experience. And then also, I got to ask right before we do that, do you ever consider yourself vaccine injured, or do you just think that this happened regardless, or it would have happened
You
regardless?
know, I do see a lot of the things that are out, and sometimes, I do believe that it could have led to it. But I think there were a lot of factors involved. The day of the stroke, it was kind of it happened and then it slowly got to a stroke. But the thing with the stroke, I mean, since this incident, I've learned about strokes, and there's two different types of strokes. One is a blockage and another is like a burst. And so I had the one where one of my arteries bursted. But what had happened, let me step back, is I was working out that day at the gym, and you know, it was a light workout. I didn't do anything crazy. But afterwards I was stretching. I don't tell people like because it is kind of weird. But yeah, I was stretching, and one of my like arteries or something, it bursted. And so it was as I was stretching, and I thought it was really weird, but at that time it got me really dizzy and nauseous. And so I had to sit down for a second. And I was thinking in my head, what is going on? I didn't know. And yeah, so then I wasn't sure. So I sat down for a little bit. I didn't want to call, like the ambulance because I was inside of the gym. And so I thought it was kind of embarrassing.
Mhm.
So I was like, let me give it about 5, 10 minutes and see how I feel. And after 5 minutes, I felt better. So then what I did was I just went about my day and I drove home actually, and I felt pretty normal. But I do believe your body kind of like when something happens to you, it kind of like adjusts and kind of figures it out. And so I think that's what happened with me. But I actually went home and I was actually getting a house during that time. So I had a lot of things going on and I kind of just went about my day again. I think that happened on a Sunday. But yeah, I went about my day again and I actually kind of forgot about it. But then I started building a slight headache. And so it wasn't anything too dramatic. And so I just kind of took aspirin and I just Tylenol and went about my day. But yeah, so about a week passed actually, and it was like maybe a Friday or something. And yeah, that's when the stroke symptom, like, because I had a slow bleed. And so that's when the stroke hit me. And when it hits you, the way you know is there's certain symptoms that you could get if you're having a stroke. And now I know is there's an acronym called BFAST, which is balance, eyes, facial drooping, your arms if you can't lift them up, your slurred speech, and then if you have any of those, then T is the time, which means to, get help or, so then I was having some issues like balance and my eyes were the main ones. And also I was throwing up. And so, yeah, it was like on a Friday or Saturday. And yeah, I suddenly got that. But I think at that time, I didn't really correlate it to a stroke. And so, yeah, that's kind of what happened. But I was kind of in denial and I was just wanting to go to sleep. And at the time, it was just me and my girlfriend, and she didn't feel comfortable, like just having me sleep. I said, don't call the ambulance. But then she didn't feel good about it because she never sees me sick like that. And so I was thinking it was food poisoning, but Yeah, it turns out I think it was like after a day, then she ended up just not feeling good about it and she called the ambulance, which I'm grateful she did because I believe if I would have gone to sleep, things would have been different. I don't know if I'd still be here today.
Uh, so when you say a vessel burst, it was in your head, in your brain.
Yeah, it was in my brain. It was actually, there's two vessels that go to the cerebellum, and that's one of the vessels that broke. And the cerebellum is in the back of the head. And I found out that cerebellum right there is responsible for like coordination, balance, a lot of different things as well, but that's the main thing, I believe.
Wow, so that happened on a Sunday. Going back before that, how long before that did you get your vaccination done and all that? Was it pretty soon before or like months before?
You know what? I think it was about a month. I'm not too clear on the timeline.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I always just wonder if there's a relation there or not. But then you went the whole week. Were you still able to drive and go to work, or did you have the week off and just feeling kind of crappy, or how did that go?
I was still able to drive and go to work.
But it was rough, huh? A
And
rough week.
I had like, it was a small headache that was growing, but it wasn't anything that it was like, I know some people get like extreme headaches and I didn't get an extreme headache, but maybe I was taking aspirin.
Hmm.
And then when it had happened, when that vessel burst, I wasn't sure too. I asked a couple of people at work and we were like, oh, could it be a stroke? But then, we were like, oh, I'm too young to have a stroke. So we kind of just brushed it off.
Right? Well, you were 33 at the time that it happened. Is that right?
Yeah, I was 36.
36. Okay. Yeah, that's super young. And I know you're going to the gym all the time and working out, and life was good. You're just like everything was going so well. And then all of a sudden, bam, you get hit with this. It's like, what the heck? What a surprise.
Yeah, I know it definitely was a shocker, I think, for myself and as well as everybody around me.
Yeah. So, you had to have a surgery. How did they repair that artery? Um, and then what was your recovery like?
So you know what? At that time, I'm not too clear. So, I do want to look into it some more, but at that time, I guess between the two strokes, the most dangerous one is the one I had. And so the way they do it, because it's an internal bleed, the way they do it is they have to, I guess, like stitch up the burst because there's a vessel that breaks and they have to stitch it up. And so actually it got a little complicated because after they stitched everything up, um I had internal bleeding. So the first procedure didn't go well. And so I had a lot of internal bleeding and my brain was swelling up within my skull. And so that was when they had to make a choice to do a second surgery and remove parts of my brain to allow for space to for the for the bleed to have for for the brain to have some room to bleed.
That's
Yeah,
really
so
serious.
that's why mine was a lot complicated, but yeah, that second one they weren't sure if it was already I think dangerous that I had that hemorrhagic stroke, the one where there was a brain bleed, but then the second surgery was what made it even more, yeah, grimmy. Like my family didn't think I would make it, right? But yeah, because I believe after my first surgery, they had said that part of my left side was paralyzed. It wouldn't even respond. But then after the second surgery, so it's kind of ironic that after the second surgery, then there was a little more movement. So after they did the second surgery, they gave it time to see how my body would react. And, you know, it didn't, yeah, it didn't, it actually like was getting better. So then, in the end, it ended up working out because I had more movement on my left side. Because the way a stroke works is it affects normally just one side of the body. So your right brain affects your left side of your body, and your left brain affects your right side. And so my right side of my brain was the part where it had damage, so it affected my left side. And so I had more movement on my left side. And so, yeah, as far as recovery, I think, in the beginning, I barely had any function. I couldn't walk. My balance, was horrible. Yeah. But, I think, as time has gone on, I think your body is incredible. It needs time to heal as long as you do the right things. And, I think it has proven to be able to heal and to come back, to almost normal.
The brain is incredible. I mean, neurons will literally recreate truncated bundles elsewhere and divert themselves around dead parts, in order to reattach to what they need to make the body work well. And it looks like, I mean, full recovery. I mean, hats off. I know how hard you worked and for how long. And can you explain to everyone listening, like what the process was like? I know right at first, I mean, you were pretty out of it, and then things started to slowly come back to you, and then you started rehab. What was that process like for you?
Yeah, yeah, let me explain that. I think initially upon waking up, I wasn't sure what happened, because I didn't know it was a stroke, and so they had to tell me. But I think in the beginning I was in denial, and so they told me, "Hey, don't get up because you can't walk." But I did it anyways, and I got up and I immediately fell on the ground. So it's a big shocker because it's like 1 minute you're good, and the next minute you wake up and your life is like completely changed. And I think it took me a while. I think in the beginning, yeah, your body is just in shock, and you can't function like before the stroke. And so yeah, I think immediately what the hospital they do is they put you in rehab immediately, so that way you can start gaining function and start working out and stuff again. And so immediately I was just doing what the doctors and the physical therapists had told me. They set you up with a bunch of different therapists to help you with your speech because my speech was affected as well, and just different tasks. There's an occupational therapist. They help you with different tasks like brushing your teeth, bathing, those type of things. But like, yeah, like everything like that, I couldn't do on my own, like brushing my teeth and showering and, just eating, like feeding myself. I couldn't even swallow at that time. So they were, using a feeding tube to give me food and give me the nutrients. But yeah, I think for about a couple weeks, yeah, I would do it's called inpatient rehab.
Hmm.
And after a while, I think it was a couple weeks, they had transferred me to an outpatient rehab, which is another hospital that you stay at to help you focus on all that rehabilitation to get you up to speed before they feel like you're good enough to go home and do it on your own. So yeah, that was kind of my thing. But yeah, after that, I think it was after a month or something, I finally got good enough for them to release me. And so, yeah, and
Wow,
also,
that's quick.
yeah, yeah, I think it was about a month. Yeah. And so it was good because, man, I remember in the beginning, food, I was just excited to go home and eat food.
I bet, man.
Yeah, that hospital food wasn't the best.
No, and feeding tube, that's not so delicious either. How
Oh, I
long were you on the feeding tube?
think I was on it for over a week.
Wow. And then you experience atrophy, but then with rehab, all the muscles start working again and coming back. And I mean, you look great. I remember too that you've shared some pictures of the beginning of your journey, and one of your eyes, they had to like put a patch over it so that it would sort of, the muscles would start to work again and they would align. And I really appreciate you showing the vulnerable parts of your journey because I mean, people don't know how incredibly difficult and challenging and frustrating something like a stroke can be, or staying in the hospital for weeks or months at a time, or in a rehab facility or nursing home. I mean, it is a lot to navigate, man. And just by watching you share your story and the stories of others on Hope for Stroke Survivors, it's inspired me to almost as a preemptive strike, learn what to look for and what to do if and when something like that does happen to me or someone I love. And it's super helpful. I love what you've been sharing.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate it. It did take me time, to want to share it. And now looking back, I wish I would have taken more footage, thankful that I have pictures that I have. But, yeah, you definitely, like, I was going through, different things, and vision was a big one for me. I've learned that strokes are very complicated and everyone gets affected differently. And so a big one for me was my vision. And I did do a lot of rehab for that, but it took about over a year for it to get to a point where I could even do the rehab because I couldn't even measure my deficits on the systems because it was that bad. But yeah, my eye was like completely, like shifted, so they weren't aligned at all. Like I still have double vision. That's one of my deficits. I have double vision when I'm looking at things, but it's still improving. I'm still working on it on a daily basis, and it's been about 3 years.
That's amazing. And one thing I want to point out too is the fact that you were in such good shape. You're always working out, eating well, you're young. And so your recovery went extremely well because you were doing all the things good for your body and brain at the time, and the blood flow, the lymphatic system. I mean, everything was working so well that, I mean, a lot of people wouldn't have made it through what you experienced. But that just goes to show how important it is for us all to eat well and to exercise on a regular basis, because when something does inevitably come in our lives like this, that being in that kind of shape will really help us out to navigate and flow into, healing and wellness and wholeness a lot quicker.
Yeah, I really believe what you're saying. I'm thankful that I was exposed to, being active and doing these certain things because I do feel like it has helped me in my recovery and actually through my surgery as well.
Yeah. For your family, your girlfriend, I mean, this must have been such a shock, and all that time, I mean, all the frustrations and brokenheartedness, the and now to see how well you're doing, and I bet your family and your girlfriend are just like blown away and so happy, that you are where you're at and you're still improving every day, with all this work you're doing.
Yeah, yeah, everyone was definitely in shock. We all weren't sure what was possible, what would happen, and so yeah, they are, I do appreciate them. I know that they are in shock. I guess sometimes being in it, I don't know, sometimes maybe we see each other all the time. I don't know if they see it as much, but yeah, looking back, especially with pictures, even me, sometimes I forget because we're so consumed with so much that, sometimes I'll forget like what exactly has happened. And, I think looking back at pictures, it really reminds me. Yeah.
Did you have any funny stories or experiences along the way, during the healing, interacting with the people?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah. In the beginning, my emotions, I think what I've learned is from stroke, it causes a lot of brain damage. And for some reason, in the beginning, I would argue with everybody. And you know me, I don't really argue with people that much. But in the beginning, I would just argue with everyone. And even, I think in the beginning, I noticed it is my nurse that was helping me out. We'd get in these little arguments about things because I started noticing like little things that maybe she wasn't doing, or, the staff, they weren't like cleaning up, and they just leave stuff like for a long time. And so, it kind of irritate me. But yeah, I was just like we were just bickering at each other, and I mean that's the thing that pops up in my head. But as far as something else that's funny, yeah,
Uh,
I'll have to get to you.
it was for a total of about 10 years of my life, I worked in an industry where I would do non-emergency transportation for people that have had strokes or, that had any kind of disability. And for a few years, it was a private company, and the rest of the time worked through the city. And it was
Wow.
by far my favorite thing to do. I had a hard time paying the bills, of course. It was a very low-paying job, but I loved it. It was so inspiring to see people recover and keep getting better and better through hard work and ambition and relentlessness and commitment to their health and wellness. But
Yeah,
I've been very close to a few people and even moved in with them a few times years and years ago and tried to help where they just were not themselves because part of their brain had died and they sometimes couldn't even remember who they were. But it's fascinating, the brain, like all of a sudden it'll come back for a week and then bam, it's gone again. And you're like, whoa, what just happened? It's the recovery process comes and goes and it's ever expansive. And again, dude, I'm just so grateful for your recovery. I'm grateful for the way your life is going and for all the hope and inspiration that you share with so many people through your own recovery.
yeah. Thank you so much, Pete. Yeah, I didn't know you did that, but I think, being exposed to that stuff, it really does give you a different perspective. Um, what I did, what I wanted to do is because I really appreciate all the medical staff that helped me during that time because, that memory will never go away. I appreciate what they did because they do it not just for me, but, for a bunch of people. And so what I did was during my recovery, I think it took me about a couple years, like 2 years until I started feeling more like things were starting to move a lot better. And what I did was I made sure to go back to the hospital where I had surgery, and it's called Chandler Regional Hospital. And so I went there to go pay a visit to the nurses that helped me, and I was able to connect with one of them. And it was cool because she was saying that, oh, she never gets to see what happens to her, like the patients afterwards. So I do. I one of my goals is to go back again because now it's been 4 years almost, and so I would want to go back there, and I think it'd be cool to spend some time maybe with patients as well.
Mhm.
Going through that because it is a big shocker when you're going through it, and to give them that picture like, oh, okay, because I think when I went home, that's when things really hit me because you're at home and you're like, oh, okay, I used to do this and that, and now it's completely different. And I think when they go home, at least have that connection with them so they realize or they can see what's possible, for them if they do the right things.
Oh yeah. Looking at you, I wouldn't even know that you had gone through something like that. And when you go back, I'm sure a lot of the patients will be like, yeah, he doesn't even know what I'm going through. But if you literally printed out pictures of your
Mhm.
journey, I mean, you had a feeding tube, the pictures of that you've posted with your eye going the one way, and then the patch and the journey, it's like, oh, you do get what I'm going through. I mean, it's going to blow people's minds. It's so inspiring to see your recovery and how far you've come. And it shows character that you went back there and showed appreciation. And it is a big deal for nurses to see their patients doing well again. Like, oh my gosh, I had a part in this. This is, it keeps them going, energizes them. That's why they do it.
Yeah, I respect them so much. Yeah, it really does for them to give us that energy. I was like, wow, I made a big difference. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Hey, no, I thank you for saying that because sometimes I think just me going through this whole thing is, I'm not sure, because you look at yourself, from a different view than everyone else. So, hey, thank you for saying that, man.
And isn't it interesting too, like how hard we can sometimes be on ourselves and how our own personal philosophies and beliefs sort of need to shift in order for us to see ourselves in a better light and to do better and create better, and be more and experience more. self-acceptance is an interesting topic. It's just recently that I've learned the importance of it because we can only accept others to the level that we learn to accept ourselves.
Yeah.
And the more open our hearts are and our minds are, and the more accepting we are of ourselves just as we are, the more we can do and be and give for others, and that is a big deal. There's a book by Maxwell Maltz called Psycho-Cybernetics, and it's all about the self-image. And that's an audio book that I like to listen to once every year just as a reminder.
Oh yeah.
It's really good. I know that you were raised with certain beliefs, and I'm wondering, like, the belief differences before the stroke as opposed to after the stroke. Have you had to sort of upgrade belief system, or like what what's different now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do feel like, the family aspect, it's taught me a lot of character and different beliefs, but we've always had a focus on, our religion, and I think it has made me more spiritual. My faith is a lot stronger now. I think during those dark moments, you kind of go to your faith, and well, at least I did. And my faith is a lot stronger now, and I think there was a lot of things that had helped me through recovery. But I do believe that I've always believed that everything kind of happens for a reason. But I think now, especially now, I think my faith is a lot stronger, and I do. I'm grateful. I'm more grateful for things for sure. Just having to regain it back.
Um, on TikTok and Instagram, I've noticed these little yellow posts, and you always have number one, number two, and number three, like things that you've changed or that have inspired you or that you do differently now. And I really like reading those every time they pop up.
Oh, thank you, man.
So, what was it that inspired you to create Hope for Stroke Survivors?
Yeah, yeah, it kind of wasn't, my intention was not to create it for people to see. It was actually to do it for myself. Because, yeah, I do believe, like, at that time, I wasn't, I was just focused on myself, and, there wasn't a lot of things out there that I wanted to consume. And so, I mean, I was at a different point in my life. And so I was collecting things like rehabilitation ideas, things about stroke, positive content. I really enjoyed that. So I was doing it for myself, and I was doing it for fun. And then I just titled it Hope for Stroke Survivor. And so I was just doing it for myself. And then, I had a friend say, "Hey, why don't you share it with people?" So, because it was a private page. And so then I decided to share it. And all of a sudden I started noticing people started gravitating towards it. And then I thought it was kind of odd. But then after a while, we were talking. I'm like, oh, why don't I was thinking it would be good for me, kind of therapeutic. And my friend said, why don't you do like advice for people? And so that's how that orange thing started. And I didn't know how to do it, but I just tried to do a story, and I came up with that. And then I just wrote down a list of things that, hey, have helped me. And at that time, I was in a different spot for sure. But it was still, that was like, I think a year or two past my stroke. And so, it was different from even now. And so then I just started writing things down, and I started doing it. I believe it was like weekly, and then it started changing. Yeah, that's how it was born. But yeah, I just started doing it more consistently and sharing it, and then you start coming up with your own rhythm and schedule. And now I just do it on my off time, and I'm learning things like how I can schedule things so it just goes automatically.
Yeah, I've noticed the progression and how it just keeps getting better and better, and all the things that you're sharing are super useful for anybody, whether they've had a stroke or a health issue or not, because one, you're going to, if you're completely healthy and always have been, you're going to know that if something happens, that there is hope. There are other people going through this. You're not alone, you know, and it's almost like, okay, like what do I do now to prepare for something like that in case it does happen? And after it does happen, now I know what to do because I've been following this channel, Hope for Stroke Survivors, and I'm like, oh yeah, I got this, It's kind of inspiring to know that it's not the end of the world. You can get better and things will change and progress as time goes by.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, being, I think, exposed to this, yeah, I can just see people's comeback. People come back from health challenges, and it inspires me too, to keep on pushing. And, it's like, oh, a lot of things, I didn't know was possible. And even I'm learning too, especially when seeing other people's stories.
Yeah, I really love the Instagram lives that you've been doing too, like all the different stories, the doctors that you've had on. I listen to them and I'm like, wow, I'm really glad that Phil's doing this because I get so much out of every one of them, man. It's really inspiring. It's a great reminder. And the funny thing is, when you first started sharing Hope for Stroke Survivors, it came across my feed, and I'm like, oh, wow. I started following this, and I was messaging back and forth with the creator of Hope for Stroke Survivors, not knowing it was you
Oh yeah,
for
I remember.
weeks. And then I found out it was you, and I'm like, oh, dude. Oh, okay. Now I get it. I was like, gee, duh, felt like such a dummy. And I'm like, ah, that's Phil. He created this. This is cool. So anyway, thanks for
Another,
creating it, man. Keep it up. That's so
hey, no
cool.
problem, man. That's a funny story. Yeah, it's definitely evolved. I think, I didn't even have this intention, but I think just doing this, I've been exposed to those doctors and just kind of built little relationships in there, And so I just asked them, hey, can they give us some advice? And a lot of them, they're passionate to help others. And so, I've learned that. And so it's cool to connect with people. And I try to think about some questions that, I wish I knew or that I'm curious about. And also some people in the community reach out and are like, oh, I want to know about this or that, depending on what stage of recovery they're at. So that's kind of, it just has evolved to this point now.
That's so awesome. Yeah, what you're doing is super useful for so many people. And it's funny you say like you were doing it for yourself and then a friend kind of told you, "Hey, why don't you start sharing this with people?" That's exactly how Good in the Head started years ago. I was just writing for myself, and trying to
Yeah.
reprogram my subconscious mind to think differently and create a better life. And a buddy reached out and said, "Hey, man, why don't you, create a website or do a vlog or all these things?" And I'm like, "What's that?" I had to learn a lot of stuff along the way, and had that friend not told me to do that, we wouldn't be here now talking. So I'm really grateful for people in our lives that push us and inspire us to do things that at first are really uncomfortable but turn out being super useful for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we kind of have similarities too, I'm glad that your page is born too, because even when I read your content, it helps me too. And I think I originally, I don't know, it just evolved in how we collaborate now. And, I think it's good because I think the mental side of it is so important, within our daily lives. And, I think it's good to have that, as you're recovering, because not everyone, you know, is it gets that perspective, and so it's nice to read your content.
Yeah, appreciate that, man. And for anybody who is a follower of Phil and doesn't know anything about me or what I've done, just check out goodinthehead.com. And like you said, it's about getting good in the head and staying mentally and emotionally strong and growing the spirit and evolving and expanding. Um, one question I had is, as a friend or family member of someone who has experienced health issues, what can someone do to best support and love someone who has experienced a stroke or other health issue?
Oh, that's a good one. I think based off my experience, I think it's good to know that every stroke is different. There's a lot of factors, and I think sometimes when someone goes through something, it's good to just listen. A lot of times, we want to be able to help them by sharing something, but sometimes a person just needs to be heard or wants to get something out. But I think, it's good that, when you try to help, but sometimes just listening to be there for them, because it took me time to process things. And in the end, I think, everybody has some kind of advice for me, but sometimes in the end, it comes down to you. And so just listening, it's very helpful.
So I like that. And I've noticed a lot of the people over the years that I've known who have had pretty severe strokes that are nonverbal. I look into their eyes and see so much, that they're almost pleading, please understand me and hear me, and they can't speak, but they're in there still, and you can see it in their eyes, and there's just a disconnect between the brain and the mouth for some reason. But what are some ways that we can support these people that are nonverbal and unable to communicate um, verbally?
Yeah, that's such a good one, because intellect a lot of times is, we judge the outside, but I've learned that, sometimes that does happen, if you have like some kind of a stroke that affects your communications. But I do, maybe it goes along the lines with being there for them. Sometimes they know a lot more. Like in the beginning of my stroke, even when I was talking, a lot of times, yeah, what I say is different from, what I think. And so, I think listening to it goes down to listening, being there for them, and also maybe not talking down to people, because sometimes just because they don't talk a certain way, you kind of talk down to them, or you kind of like talk to them in a certain manner. And so I think that's, it's a good reminder to kind of, people do notice certain things, when you kind of are talking down to them.
Yeah. Yeah, the energy's different. It feels different when you're talked down to. Yeah, that's good advice. Thank you. So what thoughts or beliefs were most comforting and empowering to you when you were going through your most difficult times? I mean, you've already said you kind of went back into religion and spirituality, but what were some things that helped you out the most along the journey back?
Yeah, I do feel like, I think in the beginning, towards the beginning of my stroke, my cousin, I was having a conversation with one of my older cousins, and he had really broken his like leg, and I remember he was in a wheelchair and for a time frame, and he recovered from that. But was on the phone with him, and he gave me some advice, and he said, "Hey, you have to be your own best friend." And at that time, I didn't fully understand it, but as time went on, I realized, I think this whole process, there's a lot of times you spend in your head and things like that. And so, you know, I felt like self-belief is a big one, and just like being there for yourself as well, self-love. And, I think that's important. I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned is, and it goes along with that quote you said too, because before you can love others, you got to love yourself. And, I agree with what he said is, during this journey, it comes down to you being your best friend and being there for yourself, developing yourself, spending time for yourself. Because, a lot of things can change on the outside, but you still have control of how you want to view it. And so, yeah, that's what I would say.
Man, I love that. So, what were some of the most helpful exercise or new habits that have helped you the most in your recovery process?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it depends on, what stage I was at, but I do feel like, I think walking was a big one for me. I think there's a lot of exercises that are very simple, very basic that, I was taking for granted, but I think walking was a big one. And there's a lot of benefits to that. I'm trying to push my parents to do it a lot more now. We actually do it every Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I think, that's healthy because not only physically but mentally too, it does a lot for your cognition,
Mhm.
walking, basic body exercise are good. You do pull-ups. I started just hanging on a pull-up bar at first. I think push-ups are good, squats, just like body weight squats is fine. Yeah, that's how I started, and eventually I started building myself up.
That's awesome. They do say that probably the most important exercise is walking, and the longer the better because it gets the blood pumping and places where it doesn't if we're just stagnant sitting there all the time. But one thing I learned is we've got four times the amount of lymph fluid as we do blood in our bodies, and whereas the blood gets pumped through the body, with the heart and the blood vessels and veins and everything. The lymph fluid uh, doesn't really move through the body unless we're moving. And walking is one of the main exercises that gets that lymph fluid moving, and it boosts our immune system, our cognition, like you're talking about. Brain repair comes much more quickly when the blood's flowing because we're walking or exercising. And they say now, like all the new stuff coming out, all the information is, hey, the more muscle you have, the longer you're going to last, especially if you're having to recover from something. And so that's really good to think about. Um, I'm glad you brought up walking. That's cool.
Oh yeah, I love how you're sharing that. You're very knowledgeable with all those things, and I relate to that. I think I'm trying to build some muscle mass, especially after hearing your um your podcast interview with Eric too. That was
Yeah,
a
right. It's never a bad thing to be strong, he said, and that's so true.
yeah.
And I think that goes for every area in life too, spirituality, emotions, mentality, philosophy, finances. It's never a bad thing to be strong. And we can always get stronger and better. And no matter what area we're focusing on, just get those reps in and keep going. That's
Well,
awesome.
to get that from Eric too and doing it the right way, the safe way, is important too.
Yeah. For years and years, because of the medications I was on, like the mood stabilizers, antidepressants, tons and tons of like Tylenol, Excedrin, ibuprofen. I mean, my liver, my kidneys were pretty rough for a while, but I did develop some back issues where I would blow out discs, I'd herniate discs, rupture them. I've gone through years of not just pain, but recovery, injections, steroids, that burned the nerves and all these things. And eventually, I came across the work of Dr. John Sarno. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't doing any of those things, and I was recovering incredibly quickly. He wrote books about physical pain, especially back pain, and it's John E. Sarno, Sarno. And I found him on YouTube and then bought a couple of his books and would listen to them while we're working. And his main thing that he helped all of his clients with for the 50 years that he was a pain specialist was working through the repressed emotions like rage and frustration that we all have as humans,
Yeah.
and doing that by journaling, joining a group and talking about it, getting it out instead of repressing it and keeping it within the chakra system and trapping the energy that flows through us at all times that we truly are. And it's kind of cool. Like yesterday, I was doing straight leg deadlifts and I had like 195 pounds on the bar and I went down. I'm like, oh, popped the little disc went out. I felt it. I know what that is. And I learned from Eric that the worst thing you can do is just recover by relaxing or sitting there. And I was like, oh, okay. So I took off all the weight and just got the bar. And I really slowly started doing that exercise to get the blood flow and the new oxygen in there. And then I went home and I sat around watching TV for about an hour. And then as soon as I stood up, oh, there it is again. So I started doing a little working out and getting that blood flow again. But the constant movement I've noticed is how we keep that flow going, you know, and it doesn't get all bundled up or stuck in our bodies and cause us pain. So that Eric was a lot of fun listening to. It was a good interview.
And just hearing those little things too, it's a good reminder, and I like it. I think I could use a lot of that too.
Before we close, is there anything that you want to say to the audience or anything you want to share?
I really appreciate everybody's support. I think it has helped, even like little words, text, prayers, whatever, being there. I understand, we all got things going on, but I really appreciate everyone being there. And, I think it's helped me to get to this point. And, as I continue on with my recovery, I think it evolves, it goes through different things. So maybe, a lot of things might look more normal now, but, it's evolving. And, I do appreciate everybody, for being there, being patient. A lot of times people are like, "Oh, so you're normal now?" But it's a lot to it. So I appreciate everyone's support and patience. And I guess that's pretty much it. But yeah, Pete, I'm glad this is the first, interview. I've been waiting for this, and our friendship has evolved. And so I remember the first time meeting you, and I thank you too, man, because you have helped a lot.
I really appreciate you, man. And for all the listeners, go to TikTok and Instagram and look for Hope for Stroke Survivors. It's Hope, the number four, stroke survivors. And there's so much information that everybody, I think, is eventually in their lives going to need. And so why not preemptively, you know, start learning these things that will help and empower so much to expand into wholeness at all times, you know. Um, Phil, you're a beautiful soul. So proud of your journey and all your hard work. So inspired by you. I'm really grateful for your friendship and thanks for everything you're doing. Keep it up.
I mean, thank you, Pete. Grateful for you, man. Yeah.
All right. Well, that does it for today's episode on the Good in the Head podcast. Check out goodinthehead.com. And as always, stay good in the head. Much love to you all. We appreciate you guys listening to this. Thank you. Please share it. And we wish you all the best in your own journeys.